These 5 tips are the best things that I wish I knew as a beginner Dungeon Master. They're things that I'm constantly reviewing all the time. So whether you're a new Dungeon Master or a veteran, you can use these to guide your players through epic tabletop role-playing games. Oh, and there's one bonus tip at the end, so stick around for that. Tip number 1, free tools to use. There are so many tools out there, it's unbelievable. Whether you need some magic item prices, whether you need crafting tools, whether you need maps, traps, anything generated, here are some websites that are extremely handy. Don John. This website has it all for the DM who loves to be completely random. Anything you need you can find in a random generated table, not just from 5th edition Dungeons & Dragons. You can look at all the old editions and take anything you need from them and then plop them straight into your 5e game. The second website that I'm going to suggest is Sane Magic Item Prices. This place is really good. They have all magic items in a nice, easy to search through database. You can download the database too, but I usually just have the website open. Search for exactly what you need. It'll show you the price. We all know magic items in 5th edition can be a bit weird price-wise, especially since some potions are far more potent than others, even though they have the same set price point pretty much. I would much rather use this website than have to go into the DMG, find which magic item is on which item table, cross-reference that with how much it costs, and then try and allocate a cost to it depending on how frequently you're going to give it out. It just blah, 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 blah. Just use the website. The third website is Kobold Fight Club. Now, some of you guys have probably heard of this. It's pretty popular. It's pretty good. Basically, what you can do, put in the number of players you have, put in the player level, then randomly generate an encounter for any difficulty you choose from trivial all the way up to deadly. If you're looking for specific monsters, you can search them. It does have a limited amount that are in the actual database of the website. However, you can pretty easily find what you need for a beginner Dungeon Master, almost no matter what. And the good thing about this place is, if you want to find out how difficult an encounter is going to be, you can pick the monster you want, chuck it in, again, scale your players' levels and how many there are, and it'll tell you whether or not it's a deadly difficulty or medium or easy encounter. Just remember when you are creating some encounters that action economy is king in 5th edition Dungeons & Dragons. The closer the amount of actions are the enemy have to the amount of actions that the players have, that will somewhat make it more difficult for your players. And the fourth and final site I'm going to mention is Google Image Search. I know it sounds kind of dumb, but if you just put in anything D&D battle map, castle D&D battle map, forest D&D battle map, you're going to get a hit. If you are trying to make your own battle maps, or you just want to purchase some, there's tons of people out there making maps on various different websites. You can use other websites to create maps themselves, like incarnate.com. The second tip I have for you guys is the pacing and length of your adventures. How long is this game going to run? Are you running a one-shot, one-session adventure? Are you running a short adventure over a few sessions? Or are you running a multi-adventure, very long campaign? This is the first thing to ask yourself when you're deciding the length of an adventure and how to pace it out. Figure out what kind of story you want to tell and then how many key plot points are going to be in that story. You don't have to determine the story itself, of course, because the players will help you do that, but try and figure out how many key moments the players need to take for the story to make sense. The more plot points you have, obviously, the longer the adventure is going to run. However, no matter the length of the adventure, you want every session to be an individually rewarding experience. And remember here, the 3-act story structure is very helpful for pacing out each session. So that includes the setup, a confrontation, and then a resolution. The big time consumer, almost every single session, is going to be your confrontation, because in Dungeons & Dragons 5th edition, most of the time confrontation means combat. And combat can get pretty boggy, but don't worry, I got tips for that too in another video. A good way to figure out pacing as well is look at your players and look at their characters. Know your players well enough to know how quickly they might make decisions in certain areas. Also, know their characters well enough to know what that character has a specialty in. Most of the time, players are pretty centered around combat, so having one of those per session, good idea. There are other types of encounters in Dungeons & Dragons, I guess you'd call them. A social interaction could be included as an encounter, and also a skill challenge could be included as an encounter as well, or rather, a confrontation. Remember, you want to give your players time to discuss, plan, and act on all these kinds of situations, and those are the things that are going to take time through your session, and they're also going to determine the pacing. By providing a sense of urgency in certain situations, maybe a skill challenge where you're chasing someone will give the pacing of the adventure a more hectic feel to it, and then others where you might be investigating a room and you're trying to find clues can slow the pace. Remember to include these in variation so it doesn't always feel like the characters are running 100 miles an hour or they're not moving at all. If you've made it this far into the video, it would mean the absolute world to me if you could click on that like button and the subscribe, get the bell on, and you will know when more of our videos go live. I can't wait to make more videos like this. My brain is full of ideas all the time, and I'd love to help new people become Dungeon Masters. I do have a Patreon, links down below, where you can find a bunch of free stuff if you join up as a free member. I also have a couple of things up on Dungeon Masters Guild. You can go and check those out. A few one-shots, subclass, some pre-generated character packs for new Dungeon Masters to hand out, and follow everywhere at Critical Mitts. Alright, back to the video. Tip number 3, setting the scene. Sometimes your players get stuck and you think, what the hell guys, this is easy. The answer is so obvious. But you're the person that designed the place, so it's a lot easier for you to see what they're missing. So when you need to describe something and go into detail, say as much as you want the players to notice obviously, and then say maybe even a little bit more. It's not always just enough to tell them about the objects in the room. You want to set the tone of the scene as well. So whether that's light reflecting off a surface, a smell, gust of air moving through the room, even the taste of the air within the room. The smell of decaying flesh, or the smell of fire, or even the smell of sweet baked goods. All those set a very different tone for things that might have happened or are about to happen in the room that they're in. And that's just from the smell alone. One tip I would give here is skimping on details until the players go to investigate. You don't really need to tell them what wood the desk in the corner of the room is made out of before they've even gone over there to look at the desk. You also don't need to have predetermined any of these things either. You can improvise and make up things as you go along. You want to give more detail and more specific detail on key parts of the scene that are important you want the players to pay attention to. If you want the desk to be important, talk more about it, explain more about it, describe its intricate details and maybe how one of the drawers is just not sitting as flush as the others. And remember, once you tell the players what they see, they're always going to want more information. So when they roll a perception check and it's low, or they roll an investigation check and it's low, you can describe something extra that they find. Or maybe you can use time as a reference to say that while they rolled low, it just took them longer to find the thing that you might want to give to them. And remember, throw in red herrings. Because once your players realize that the only things that you describe in more detail are the important things in the room, they will immediately know what things are important in the scenes that you're trying to set. So, use red herrings. Sometimes describe a corner of the room with a lot of depth for no real reason. Tip number 4. Engaging all of your players. Learning how to keep your players hooked is a key part to being a DM. Pacing can often help with this when the players need to pay attention to something, and you describing more and more things throughout the room means they're going to try and listen more intently to see what you're talking about. I like to include a variety of different challenges for different players and also for different characters and character types. Having this diversity of challenges allows all different players and characters to shine in different ways. It also allows your players to know that their characters are having a meaningful impact on the world around them. So having something stealthy for the rogue, having something religious for the cleric, an intellect puzzle for a wizard, having some kind of musical puzzle for a bard, or a simple social interaction for any of the charisma-based classes is a way of showing a skill challenge. There's also the opposite side where you want your melee fighters and sometimes your spellcasters to shine by thinking outside of the box or punishing those goblins with a heavy-handed sword. There's a really good book I found called The 5-Room Dungeon by John Fore, and it's really effective at engaging the players. So room number 1 is the entrance or the guardian, and it usually has some kind of thing trying to stop you. It doesn't always have to be inside of a dungeon. Room number 2 is a puzzle or roleplay challenge, so that allows the sort of inquisitive or socially adept characters to shine. Room number 3 is a red herring room. So in this instance, you're actually trying to get your players to shine more than their characters. Although this red herring room might contain something physical that they have to move around, which allows more strength-based characters to shine. Room number 4 is the room for combat. It's the climax, it's the confrontation. This is where you put in the difficult part of the dungeon or adventure. And room number 5 in this 5-room dungeon is the resolution or the plot twist. Now, I kind of prefer to go for the plot twist because it lets you lead into the next adventure. And the plot twist could just be that the thing you were looking for wasn't there, and you have to keep looking and move to the next place and rotate back to room number 1, the entrance or the guardian of the new location. And lastly, tip number 5 is have a good session 0. Session 0 is the best idea you can make sure all of your players are on the same page. Use this time to ask your players if there's anything they don't want in the game. That includes phobias or triggers or anything else that makes them uncomfortable. Discussing these things early on will immediately make your players feel more comfortable and safe at the table. In Session 0, building characters together is also a fantastic idea. A lot of people playing Dungeons & Dragons don't want to overlap their character ideas or even their classes or subclasses with other people. So having your players discuss these things together will allow them to more coherently form a better group. At this time, you can also discuss characters' backstories, maybe how they know each other or how they've had previous relationships with each other in the world that you're about to start adventuring in. This is also a time to discuss house rules and homebrew rules, whether or not your DM is going to just allow you to do whatever you want with a few caveats, or whether he's going to ban certain things from being played. I have another video coming out talking about setting ground rules in Session 0, so check that one out. Oh, and this is the bonus tip. Remember that this is a collaborative storytelling game, and everybody's here to have fun. It isn't the DM versus the players. It isn't the environment versus the players. It's everybody trying to work together to create epic adventures and really fun and happy, well, not always happy, fun and interesting stories. Dark and gloomy is great to get immersed in, but it's a bad place to stay. Break it up with some funny situations, lighthearted humor, banter out of character, or even silly events that might make some characters come off as goofy, but most importantly, keep it moving forward. The bad games are the ones that get stuck, and the worst ones are ones that just aren't fun to come to the table for. There's nothing more rewarding than as a DM at the end of the session, everyone telling you they had a lot of fun and they're looking forward to the next session. I hope if you even take just one of these tips and run with them, that it makes for epic adventures. But remember, before you start an adventure, you need to lay down some ground rules. Session 0. Let's talk more about that.